everyone, and welcome to this webinar on BESS in emerging markets. My name is Franny Flinteman. I'm project manager at Solarplaza and in charge of the future of energy, happening on the 24th and the 25th of March in Amsterdam. For those of you who don't know Solarplaza yet, let me quickly introduce us to you. Solarplaza is a global event organizer. We are founded in 2004 and are based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. We've hosted numerous events around the globe and we have a network of over 60,000 renewable energy professionals joining us at those events. This webinar is part of the run-up to our Future of Energy conference, which is happening in March in Amsterdam and which we are organizing in close cooperation with FMO. So we will be gathering around 400 renewable energy professionals at the conference for 2 days full of learning and networking. And if you're interested in the program or our amazing speakers, then please have a look at our event website. So before we get started, I have 3 practical notes to share with you. You have the possibility to submit questions to today's presenters by using the question box on your control panel in your screen. And you can also use that box for any technical issues you might encounter, and our staff is here to support you with that. Today's webinar will be recorded, and recordings will be sent to you in a couple of days. Today, our moderator is Mark Roesink. He is Renewable Energy Project Finance Specialist at FMO, and he has over 25 years of experience in structuring and closing finance for energy projects. And he played a key role in bringing FMO's first BESS deal to financial close. So welcome, Mark. We are very excited and happy to have you to lead the webinar today. And let's not wait any longer. Let's get started. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Fanny. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone, or for some real diehards in Latin America, perhaps even good night. So thank you for joining us in this webinar. We have some fantastic speakers with us, Amir Hamraz, from ACWA Power, and Aaron Brose from Globeleq, which are a few of the most active developers that we see in the emerging markets in the BESS sector, who are happy to share their experience with us. But first, I will share a few learnings from our own portfolio, which is scattered over several countries in Latin America, Africa, and Central Asia. Let me go to the first slide. So here you see a nice picture of one of our projects in Capella Solar in El Salvador. But first, a few words on FMO, the Dutch Entrepreneurial Development Bank. So operating since 1970, active in 3 sectors, agri, business, food, forestry, financial institutions, and energy. And recently, we also added water to the energy activities. So 866 employees, mostly based out of the Netherlands, but with a few offices around the globe. We have 1.5 billion, 15 billion of assets under management, which makes us the largest bilateral DFI in the world. We are 51% owned by the Dutch state, the rest by private parties. This helps us also the support and the ownership from the Dutch government to have a very nice rating of AAA, which also helps us to fund ourselves at a relatively low funding cost in the market, and also provide quite decent rates for our clients. Let me stop there on FMO. Always happy to explain more of what we're doing, but please also look out in our website, where is also a nice map world map of FMO. If you click that on Google, you can see what we're doing in the different countries that we operate in. So why do we invest in battery storage? Yeah, it facilitates the integration of clean energy, and in some countries that is really essential, as they easily reach the limits of what they can do in renewable energy without the BESS, or already reach that. So BESS helps them to bring more volumes of renewable energy in their grids. So BESS also improve access to reliable, affordable electricity, especially in rural areas. So, for example, in some of our first projects in Senegal are supporting rural grids that then also facilitate the extension of the grid to more smaller communities in the neighborhoods that were in the past not serviced. So it also is important for to bring cleaner energy and more affordable, reliable energy in some of our markets. So we see BESS as a mature technology with proven models, investment structures highly similar to renewable energy. So we're really comfortable to fund BESS around in the emerging markets, standalone or combined. So we see BESS as a key driver for higher renewable energy penetration, as I explained. And yeah, we have done, like Franny said, our first projects reaching financial close, but already some of them are built, and other are closed, and others we are working on in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. So we're scaling up our portfolio in battery storage, and at the same time we see that, and we get back to that later, on several hurdles, and we are setting up some technical assistance programs to limit some of, or come over some of these hurdles. Then going to the main structures that we see in the market. So that is the capacity payment agreements, highly similar also to tolling agreements, which you might have heard of. So a fixed fee, and then the off-taker can use the BESS as they like within certain limitations to avoid that the BESS degrades quicker than anticipated. Generally financed through project finance at similar conditions that we see for solar. Sometimes with very intensively used batteries, we see shorter tenors, but for most projects, we see tenors going up to 20 years. We also see hybrid PPAs, where there is either a blended tariff for solar and BESS, or a time-bound tariff, where there is a lower tariff during solar peak hours and a higher tariff at higher demand hours. Also project finance, similar tenors, and the debt service coverage ratios. We also see merchant contracts in the market, and with a market price of volatile prices, which less predictable, and therefore we do not generally see project finance with more equity funding. So we are not that active in the sector, but we expect that that will also come in the coming years. So what I say here, gearing, always subject to PPAs and replacement of battery capacity, etc. Then going to a few of the learnings. We see that off-takers are pushing more BESS performance risk to developers, which is a nice example of what we saw in Senegal, where we started with a project in the north with capacity payments. They only looked at that moment at capacity. If it was available, the client would receive the full revenues. And later projects in the south, there were more requirements on round trip efficiency, capacity, and availability. And during the development period, that led to some discussions with the suppliers, as the lenders generally require a back-to-back of all the guarantees that are provided in the PPA with the off-taker, that we also want to see them in the supplier agreements from the BESS suppliers and the warranties. So we also see sometimes mismatches between the user limits and the guarantees between the PPA and the suppliers. So our advice is always to bring in as BESS suppliers at an early stage in the development to avoid mismatches between what is guaranteed under the PPA and provided by the BESS suppliers. And to be honest, we have seen several months of delays as we explained sometimes to the developers, okay, this is what we would expect. And then at a late stage, they realized that what they offered to the off-takers was not really feasible from a technical perspective from the suppliers. And the market is developing fast, so that also changes almost by the day. Also, we see that sometimes there's limited know-how on BESS functions, inefficient use of BESS, which leads then to low tariffs. So we're doing TA programs to provide more know-how in the market to see that, let's say, the BESS is optimally used. Also some nice experiences some nice models where we saw that reserve capacity that is held during the day is then released at the end of the night or in the middle of the night, so that a BESS is used at least at full charge during a cycle. So cost fluctuations, that is also an issue that we've seen, and that is sometimes blocking projects. So as let's say reduced costs for the equipment lead to the off-takers wanting to renegotiate, and renegotiation then takes time. So an open book approach can help in these situations where a reduction of the investment then automatically leads to a reduction of the tariff. Sometimes we also see that prices can go up. So in some cases we have to use some concessional finance to overcome these hurdles and make the project feasibly again from an economic perspective. So standard project finance provisions are not always accepted by the BESS suppliers. That's what we see. So also discuss that at an early stage, as for example, direct agreements, quite standard in project finance, but not always accepted easily by BESS suppliers. Also, BESS suppliers shifting regional focus to larger markets. So especially, for example, in Africa, smaller markets, initially a lot of interest from BESS suppliers, but if they realized that the market was a bit small and that they had better opportunities in other countries, then they also easily abandoned the markets. So it's good that if you're working on a project, select suppliers with a strategic commitment, also with a local presence, so that if there's an issue, if there's a default or an error in the system, that they can immediately solve it. So you get better guarantees from parties that are in the country, and you lower the risk that they back out of a project and you have to find another one. Having some backup suppliers always also helps. Last one is that the gaps in the BESS policies and regulations. We will get in the other presentations a little bit deeper into this. Let me stop there. If you have any questions, then as Franny said, please put them in the box. So we will answer questions at the end of the webinar. Then I would like to introduce and warm welcome to Amir Hamraz, the Executive Director of ACWA, with a lot of experience in setting up projects in the infrastructure space, in green hydrogen, water desalination, but also a lot in renewable energy and in BESS. So Amir, we are really happy to have you, and happy to learn from what the ACWA Power learned from its projects. Anyone of you?
Okay. Thank you, Mark. You're being very kind. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us and being present for this webinar. I'm just pushing that. So I'm just gonna quick overview of ACWA Power, where we who we are for those who don't know us. That's the latest figures we had in September 2025. We have 93 gigawatt power. We have 5.3 gigawatt BESS, and we have like 55% of our power is renewables. We have more than 4,000 people, and we are mainly focused on Middle East and I would say emerging market. And myself, my two, as Mark mentioned, my two region of focus is Central Asia and Africa. Having said that, I will discuss about the BESS project in general and in the emerging market, as Mark mentioned, and to see what we face as a developer and the challenge we are facing. And I can give you some example of very different points that comes up. But first and foremost, just to next slide is about the fact that the BESS today, as Mark mentioned, is a technology readiness, is a level 9, which is fully commercial and widely banked technology, is available like lithium batteries. The global market growth is phenomenal. We have 21% increase year on year, and before we see that we're going from 97, like almost 100 gigawatt hour, right, in 2030 to basically 450 gigawatt hour in 2030. The technology cost is coming quite down. It has been really. I remember the cost has come down almost, I would say, 40% in the last 2.5 years. So that has been amazing improvement in the cost, and then that making much more affordable and bankable for different market and specifically for emerging markets. And it's a very simple and reliable business, as Mark mentioned. So that's it. That's really a start to making it very attractive for different emerging markets. Having said that, in the emerging markets, comparing to like developed market or more developed market, maybe I would say there's no merchant market. So we are relying on the offtake from a single offtaker, most of the time being the national grid or national power producer of the country. So in the contract, we have the contract is I would say there is some constraint on that, and most of the time you will see the BESS application I put here. They either use the BESS in the contract in the emerging market for peak power and peak shavings, when you charge and you charge during the low hours and you discharge during the peak hours. This is the first one they used. Sometimes they use the spinning reserve. That's slightly Israeli. They use that, but basically the peak power and peak shaving. And the second one they use a lot is the energy time shift, meaning that they, instead of having curtailment, when you have a curtailment in your renewable energy or you have excess energy, you charge the battery and you use it during evening by reducing your consumption of, for example, gas power or coal power or heavy fuel, basically. So that's really helped to bring a lot of, I would say, a lot of synergy in the energy mix, because you can use cheap renewable energy, as Mark mentioned, and use to charge energy during the day and use them during the night or at the peak hours. Then you have this spinning reserve, as Mark mentioned, that you used it when basically there is an issue with one of the, for example, you have a response, you need a quick response, you can use that very quickly. So that's it. Basically just wanted to put these two here, what we are using mostly in the emerging market. Just going to next slide. I wanted to say the block road of the emerging market. Actually, what we see here is that the first and foremost is there is no kind of regulatory framework. I would say is missing. We are working actually with Mark with FMO in one of the Central Asian countries, and there is kind of, for sometimes the regulator was looking at, so it's not a really general, what's the first best in the country, and they were just kind of, okay, it's not a power producer, it's not a water producer, so they needed to engage a law firm and then to review the law to bring in the storage, basically the storage, I would say, law and license. So that was the first that was the first thing that is sometimes the missing framework is when the BESS standalone sometimes or can have difficulties. The second point is the payment schemes. I mean, on the PPA, as I mentioned, that is a very I mean, you are paid. There is a very defined set of rules that they should be applied. For example, they can use the battery 1 time or 2 times a day during and kind of a maximum X times during the year. And if they use it more, they need to pay this amount, incremental amount. The issue is that one particularity of the batteries is that the degradation is not linear, meaning that if you use the battery once a day, or half kind of the degradation is much less than if you use the battery 3 times a day. So that has a big impact, and also the charging and discharging temperature, the discharging and charging timing has also a very big impact on the life of the batteries. So most of the time, the PPP structure sometimes lack of a structure that is kind of can also seen as as some of the issue that we can see, and we have seen some of the actually we are working with 2 or 3 batteries in Central Asia and kind of in Middle East, and the regulator comes to see us and they want to use it, for example, for other purpose than what they put at the beginning in the contract. So there needs to be we need to start negotiating with the off-taker. Once we have an agreement, we need to go back to the lenders, say that to the lenders, do some due diligence, show the studies. So that's also one of the points that I would say the scheme of how it is done in the emerging market also slightly I would say rigid. There is also the permitting. I think we have some overlap with what Mark has mentioned. The biggest issue is that the certification and the interconnection approval coming up and having the certification from local authorities. There is sometimes lack of discussion between the tender authorities, the regulatory authorities, and the permitting authorities. So that creates some, I would say, some block road. We see there is skilled labor shortage. That's, I think, one of the points that Mark has mentioned maybe in his presentation, is that in many of the European countries, there's a lack of specialized technical staff capable of running and maintaining this BESS. So that really brings sometimes the cost of the BESS slightly, they bring the cost of the BESS for the LTSA part to the higher side, meaning that we need to import at least for the first 2 or 3 years till we can manage to bring some of the people to the level that they can perform a standalone from outside of the country. So that's also increase can increase the cost for us and also for the off-taker. And the second point is that during the construction, again, it's short term, but one of the points here is that those are a huge kind of big container, and there is a high voltage kind of we are working with the high voltage on those containers, and the HSE is very important, and that's something that sometimes people don't realize, saying that, oh, it's a container, so it doesn't really kind of maybe it's so quite safe. Having said that, there has been a couple of HSE accidents, not the fatal one, but very serious HSE accidents happen because of people kind of not taking the rules as seriously as they should. And there is also, from our perspective, so when we discuss with the lenders, also, Mark, we mentioning that the BESS, having said that, the BESS is something that is, the technological is mature. Having said that, there is lack of performance data. The BESS really started to be, I would say, banked at large scale, I would say, in the last maybe 3 or 4 years. There has been more, I would say, in the US, maybe a slightly kind of around 2020. But nevertheless, what we see here, the really pickup of the BESS had come for the last 4 years, 3 or 4 years. So we are still kind of by the construction time, if you put the construction time aside, there is what we see here is there is some lack of the performance data, meaning that we don't have operational data and the degradations of the batteries. We don't have a kind of long historical data on that. That's also can lead to asking additional guarantees to the best suppliers, and which obviously don't have sometimes the say the financial surface or the financial strength to provide all of those guarantees, or if they provide, they need to reduce the number of the project they can do. So that's also some of the points, one of the points we see as of today as a block rod, maybe for BESS on kind of financing over a long period. Some of the kind of financial institutions, even the investors, asking a lot of questions on the kind of the data and availability of the data on the long term when you have like a 20 years PPA. That's it from my side. I will pass it to, I think I use all my time. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, thanks, Amir. That are definitely a few interesting points, blocking points that you see. And just one question before we dive into the next presentation, because we see the similar issues, especially the blocking points that you mentioned on the regulatory side. So there is some lack of experience, logically, because it's a new market, but it is with the several stakeholders, primarily from the government, utilities, regulators, etc. So, and we want to avoid that you have to do, let's say, these lengthy development processes for all your projects, so that some can benefit more from the projects that have already been realized. So, question to you is, yeah, do you see that governments, countries are trying to find the solutions or get them to a better understanding of BESS all individually, or do you also see some, let's say, global, regional initiatives in your markets just to learn better from others?
Okay, very good question, Mark. I think as a regulators, when you discuss with the people in the Ministry of Energy or off-taker, they are quite well aware of the benefits of the BESS, and they're very interested to use BESS technologies. There is, I would say, what we do as a developer is twofold. First and foremost, we try to develop the talent in the countries. I know that there is some technical assistance from FMO that you guys work can provide to us and help us to develop this talent. Is also part of that's one of the lever we will use, and we're using with the DFIs and MDBs, use these guarantees to develop the talent in those countries. The second is that in most of the project we do in the emerging markets, we have this ENS, or I would say ESG budget that we have. For example, in Uzbekistan, we have launched a technical engineering university for the young girls, and it's this is for the girls actually, for the young girls to also help them to learn kind of, for example, how to for electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, to broaden them to the to broaden them to the skills that we would like to have in those countries, and we see we are lacking on that. There is maybe one point that is sometimes some of the blocking road, I would say, people are out of the control, I would say, of the even the off-taker or the minister. We had a case recently that there was one regulation has been issued on the insurance provider in one of those countries. Not normally the MOE, kind of the Minister of Energy, if nobody has any kind of input in that. And all of a sudden, this new regulation has come up on the insurance. And we find ourselves that, okay, how can we make that work with the request, the request of the lenders and the OEM, and you see that it doesn't work. So that's kind of led you to the 6 months discussion with the regulators and with the MOE, and they understand it, but there is some sort of lack of discipline. But coming back to the BlackRock, I think the talent development in those countries, I think that is where we should put our focus on. And as a developer, we are trying to focus our energy on that. And we are trying right now, every project in those countries, to have a backup. I mean, to think about the next project and to have even more people that we should on the O&M side or the project companies in order to bring them to the scales for the next projects.
Okay, thanks a lot, Amir, for your experiences. So now let's go to Aaron. So we have Aaron Brose with us from Globeleq. So warm welcome to you as well. So we're honored to have you here with us. Aaron is Business Development Manager at Globeleq, and he has a very interesting project that he worked on and reached financial close with, the Red Sands project in South Africa. So Aaron, the floor is yours. We're happy to get into your learnings.
Thank you so much, Mark, and hello to everyone. Thank you for joining the session. Very excited to be here. So as Mark mentioned, my name is Aaron Brose, and I work on the business development team at Globeleq. We're an African-focused IPP, and I'm excited to dive deep into one project here during the session, the Red Sands battery storage project in South Africa in the Northern Cape, and walk through the challenges we had to overcome to reach financial close. I've been at Globeleq since 2019, where I've worked across various business functions, all to accelerate new investments in our core geographies. I started working on greenfield renewable development in Mozambique, Namibia, and Zambia early on my time at Globeleq, and I later worked with our project finance team, where we were one of the first IPPs in South Africa to refinance our REAP assets under a newly introduced refinancing protocol, which ultimately reduced the cost of electricity for end consumers in South Africa. And then for the last 3 years, I've led the Red Sands BESS project from early stage acquisition through development and then to financial close, which we achieved in June of last year, and now supporting our construction team into the commissioning process. Switching slides here. So Globeleq, a bit of an introduction. We are an end-to-end energy provider focused on Africa. We develop, acquire, own, and operate a diversified portfolio of power generation assets across Africa with the support of our 2 shareholders, British International Investment and Norfund. And we're committed to delivering clean and reliable energy to our customers across the continent. And now we have a specific focus on South Africa, Mozambique, the Central African Copper Belt in Zambia and DRC, and Namibia and Kenya. We've been in operation since 2002. We have nearly 2 gigawatts of assets under operations, nearly 700 megawatts of assets currently under construction, and a large pipeline. The assets that we do operate have a mix of technologies from wind, solar PV, battery, gas, hydro, and geothermal. We have 9 offices in 7 countries with over 500 employees. So our DNA is Africa. We are a long-term investor with a sole focus on Africa. As you'll see from this map here, our assets range across the continent. Big thermal assets in West Africa, standalone solar PV in Egypt, and then a mix of all those various technologies in East and Southern Africa. One of the really interesting points that Mark raised is the challenges that we all face is, particularly on the battery supply side, is their commitment and interest to some of the smaller markets, and some of these markets that you'll see here are those markets and some of the most challenging that we operate in. So how do we ensure that we have the best tier 1 suppliers that are committed to these regions? And thankfully, what we're seeing from the Red Sands project, which recently closed, is you're seeing the major battery suppliers now have a strong footprint in South Africa, which they're able to then phase out into the rest of the continent, which is really valuable for all of our projects across the developer space. In blue here, you'll see the 4 projects that are currently under construction. In Zambia, we have a solar project. In South Africa, we have the Red Sands battery project. In Kenya, the Menengai geothermal, and in Mozambique, the Tamani gas project. All 4 very different technologies in very different geographies. So what we as Globeleq do is work in some of the hardest environments in Africa to advance some of the most complex technologies and ultimately own and operate for the long term and be strong partners with our customer. So introducing the Red Sands project, the graphic shows Red Sands at commissioning, with full commissioning planned in 2028. That's a long ways away, which is maybe a bit unique from other battery projects that you'll see, and there's a reason for that, which I'll get into. But the project is 153 megawatts, 612 megawatt hours of contracted capacity. So this is capacity that we're contractually obligated to maintain over a 15-year PPA with ESCOM and the NTCSA. ESCOM, as the system operator, will have full operational control of the battery, and they're entitled to cycle the battery up to 2 times per day. The area on the bottom right is space for future augmentation builds that will be required as the battery degrades. So every year there is a test to ensure that we meet that 612 megawatt hours of capacity, which we will through the various augmentations over the 15-year life. And at commissioning, there will be a total of 148 battery containers that you see there, filled with more than 700,000 battery cells. We're using Sungrow's Power Titan 2.0 liquid-cooled energy storage technology. We went out to a full range of suppliers, and we work with multiple suppliers across the continent, but Sungrow has one of the most dynamic technologies that we used for this project. And as much as Red Sands is a standalone battery project, it's also much more. It's a very large grid connection construction project. We are constructing a brand new standalone 400 kV MTS substation as part of this project, which is 10 kilometers away from the site, all with associated new grid infrastructure and interconnection required for a new substation. So this also includes a new 500 MVA transformer. In the end, Red Sands is the largest standalone battery energy storage system to reach financial close and start construction, and we're excited to have a successful project as we move forward. A bit of background into how Red Sands came to be. After acquiring the project from the original developer, Africa Green Ventures, in 2023, we bid the project into the Battery Energy Storage IPP Procurement Program in South Africa. It's a bit of a mouthful, but a very successful program building on the Independent Power Producer Office in South Africa's REAP programs, gas to power, etc. South Africa has a very strong procurement program that they successfully have moved into the battery space a few years ago. This program was launched by South Africa's Department of Mineral Resources and Energy in 2023 to procure 513 megawatts from 5 different substations. So we bid Red Sands into the Corona substation in the Northern Cape, which has the largest capacity available in the program. There's subsequently been 2 further BESS procurements in 2 different provinces as part of this BESIPPP program. You'll see on the map on the right, that's the Northern Cape and in blue is where Red Sands is. And as primary objective for the procurement program, the newly installed battery projects are meant to play a role in relieving the transmission and distribution congestion in the Northern Cape, which currently sits without any available grid capacity to connect further generation. As you may know, the Northern Cape has some of the best wind and solar resource in the region, definitely in South Africa. So unlocking grid capacity in this region is really critical for the build out of renewables in the region, and also for reducing load shedding in South Africa, which ESCOM has done a very good job in maintaining today. So Globeleq, with our partners Africa Rainbow Energy, were awarded preferred bidder in March of 2024, following a July 2023 bid submission. Prior to the award, we engaged with the department in value for money negotiations. At that stage, when we were awarded the project, we aligned with the department on what the project would look like. And then following the award, it took about 8 months for ESCOM to confirm the final grid connection scope, which I mentioned previously. It's substantial. So managing and weathering this process really was, and the knock-on effects was absolutely key in our ability to reach FC. ESCOM is a very strong utility in South Africa, but this is one of, as being the first battery procurement in South Africa, being able to integrate the projects adequately within the systems, understand that some of the initial grid upgrades that were envisaged at the beginning of the program may have to be changed. Obviously took some flexibility on our side and some long negotiations to ensure that the project could proceed, which thankfully it did. ABSA and Standard Bank provided over $300 million in debt to the project. This underscores, major investor confidence in this sustainable infrastructure in South Africa in battery storage technologies. Very strong commercial banks in South Africa, strong DFIs across the continent as well. So we look forward to continuing working with FMO in this space as well. Energy China is the EPC on the ground, closely monitored by our robust construction team on the ground, and Sungrow, as I mentioned, is the battery supplier. Now, one of the key aspects of managing a lot of the regulatory permitting challenges for the project was we were classified as a strategic integrated project by the South African government soon after bid award in April of 2024. This is a presidential initiative to look at some of the most strategic infrastructure projects to ensure that various levels of regulatory and approval processes and departments are aware of these projects and the importance for the South African infrastructure build up. So an important aspect for us to have that, and it did assist in unblocking some of the roadblocks we did have. And then finally, looking at some of the key challenges, just switch slide here. And on the road to financial close, looking at the key challenges and how we're able to mitigate those. Apologies, looking back. As you've heard a few times, ESCOM, the ESCOM process was the most challenging. Apologies, let's try this one more time. And aligning on what that final interconnection scope would be. So ultimately what that took was some flexibility on our side to be able to negotiate the scope and accept some of those changes. We knew that for this project to proceed, we needed to agree with ESCOM on what that final grid scope would look like. That can be very difficult for projects to take that on when that's not usually envisaged at the outset of a project. So finding other ways to balance that in contractual negotiations, in guarantees from suppliers, balancing that all out is very important. But being able to manage that with ESCOM was the key issue that we had to unlock in order to move the project forward. And once we did have the scope, the grid scope confirmed by ESCOM, this is a process from grid scope agreement with ESCOM to the final budget quote being issued can take up to a year. We didn't have that time, so it took immense close coordination with ESCOM and teams across South African government to ensure that we did manage the process on time, and ultimately we were able to. And then the third one being, and Amir mentioned this as well, but a lot of these approvals all the way down to the municipal, local level, and then provincial and national can be quite challenging, and all the departments and levels don't always speak to each other. Our role can often be to be the bridge builder between the various approvers who are not talking to each other. And we were able to do that with our partners, but also that classification as a strategic integrated project from the presidency did assist there. So having that backing from the relevant high-level decision makers or minister bodies in the various countries is really important to push some of these key projects through. Next, one of the challenges that we're continuing to face across our geographies is a limited contractor pool, particularly for this project because it's so complex from a grid integration point of view. Having contractors who could wrap the entire project was not possible, at least from a local contractor point of view. So what we had to do was engage in a multi-phase procurement process to understand all the levels of local and international suppliers and contractors, and then piece together the strongest consortium who are able to deliver this project on time and on budget. And one of the complicated aspects of this project being firstly a grid integration, then the battery project is, we are confined to a tight construction schedule in the PPA, but because a lot of the build out of the grid needs to happen before the delivery of the battery, getting the phasing right within the contracts, and when the battery is actually manufactured in China, for this example, it takes very close coordinations across the contractors and then ensure that we meet the PPA requirements. But overall, a very challenging but rewarding project that we were glad to be able to close on last June, and then using this project to progress other battery projects that we have across the continent has been absolutely instrumental for us as we've built really strong relationships with all the suppliers and contractors, and then other approval bodies in the various countries have seen Red Sands and want this replicated, and so making sure that we can do that and fulfill our client needs. So that's all for me, and look forward to any questions. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Aaron. Some very interesting, let's say, points you mentioned. So, and also interesting to see, let's see, the difference in markets. So, when you explain what how the market parties or the utility work in South Africa, I can imagine that is quite different from what you see in other countries, like, for example, Mozambique, or what we see, for example, in countries that just start with battery storage, like, for example, Benin. So, and then immediately going to a few questions. So, please, the audience, if you have questions, you can put them in the question box, so I will pick them up. So, and let me dive immediately into that, as we have around 10 minutes left. So one question is, what are the concerns that leads to complex permitting? Is it a lack of awareness regarding BESS? And I think, Aaron, you are well positioned to answer that question, because you have been working in different countries like Africa and Mozambique on projects, on BESS projects. So is it really a lack of awareness regarding BESS? And do you also see that is now, let's say, already solved by doing the first projects, or are there still a lot of learnings also in South Africa, for example, which is by now for a large battery storage market?
It's a very good question, and it definitely varies across the geographies. But I mean, even in South Africa, we're seeing the permitting requirements still progress and change a bit as some of these major projects have gotten off the ground. But what it's taken is an understanding that these battery projects are not they're not PV projects, right? And even though they have they can be much smaller scale. What's key is that this is an ongoing permitting project, right? Because we have augmentation builds happening over the life of the projects, so they're very much live, right? So what could be permitting requirements today, we have to ensure that that's the same 5 years down the road when that's our first augmentation build out. So it can be quite challenging, and I think, and we're seeing that the permitting bodies are still having to think through this because this is a new aspect of projects. Is essentially we're building smaller new projects every few years that have to be re-permitted, and lenders are having to take a view on that now. So it's important that that education happens. And we're doing our best, but I know we can use FMO's assistance there and others as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question that is for Amir and me, that is regarding, they come up with an example for Uzbekistan, but it is on the local currency. So how do we deal with currency fluctuations? And I can start answering the question that in the markets that we see, it's general dollar PPAs. So as the energy market is primarily dominated by dollar-based power supply, so from fossils, so markets are already used to dollars, but we also see sometimes opportunities to do something more in local currency. So Amir, also happy to hear your views, as the question was also related as the example of Uzbekistan.
Yes. So in Uzbekistan and in the emerging markets, I would say Aaron can also share his view. In Egypt, in most of the emerging markets we are working in with Azerbaijan, we are remuneration. We are not here to take a FX risk. We are at the end of the utility developer. We're not FX trader. So the deal is that our capex is in USD. So the loan we'll have to finance this capex is in USD. Our equity is in USD. So what we're requesting most of the time from the off-taker, and they fully understand the requirement is to have a dollarized or hard currency PPA. That's one of the to the extent possible that they explain here. So look, we always have some cost related to the O&M in the country, some taxes, some regulatory payment that we need to make, so and some salaries. So those costs, we are happy to get those costs in the local currency to the extent possible. But for the payment of the debt and repayment of the senior loan or reimbursement of the equity, we need to have some certainty that the payments are, I would say, either done in USD directly or in the local currency which is pegged to the USD. That's what we see specifically in the Uzbekistan. If you want, what we see here is the payment in the local currency pegged to the USD and backed by and any FX change is paid by the Ministry of Energy.
Okay, understood. thanks for that. Now I have an interesting question to both of you as developers and IPPs coming from Matt Norley. So as an IPP, do you have a preference for utilities to integrate the BESS into the generation tariff for PV and wind? Or does it make your life easier or more difficult to have separate tariffs for the BESS and the renewable energy? Is there a preference from your side? To give a bit of, let's say, the flavor, we also sometimes see the different structures. Yeah, not a strong preference from the lender's perspective or from our perspective, but we see, okay, if you have a blended tariff, then you're also depending on the renewable energy output, which is not the case if it is a plain vanilla capacity payment for the BESS. And shall we start with Amir? You have your mic open, or prefer that Aaron takes it first?
If Aaron wants to take it, happy to let it. But from our side, I think, look, we have both cases. We have three different cases. We have a standalone BESS. We have a BESS plus solar co-located, but with a kind of different tariff, and we have one kind of blended tariff, depending on which geography and how kind of what's the procurer wants. We are happy to adapt ourselves to those circumstances. We don't have a preference, I would say, from our perspective. The fact that is one thing that is coming up is that the mismatch between the lifetime between the battery and this renewable, most of the time, that sometimes could create some issues and some, I would say, some cash flow payment issues. So having, I would say, a separate cash flow is helpful for us to see if there is any excess usage of batteries, or if the government wants to negotiate something specific to the usage of the battery later on. It's much easier for us to, I would say, to reflect that and negotiate on the very specific point. That's the easiest kind of the easier way. We don't really have, to be honest, any preference here, but I would say it's easier if you have a different tariff. Once together, I would say it's slightly more complicated to get what is if there is a usage that is different, or there is some technical issues, could have a different view.
Yeah, just to completely echo that, we don't have a preference. We see all the different models with the customers we're speaking with. I mean, some customers prefer the blended tariff, and this is not just utilities; these are private customers as well. And we have examples where we have multi-asset, multi-location projects with one blended tariff. I would say it's important for all customers to fully understand the various use cases that BESS can provide, and that it may not be so simple to provide a blended tariff. So really what we're finding is part of this exercise with potential customers is to, in an open book way, run through all of the technical capabilities of the BESS, and then we can plug and play our various projects into a tariff offering. But we are agnostic in terms of how we present that tariff.
Okay, great. Thank you for your answers. So I see that there is still a bunch of questions left, but we're also nearing the end of this 1 hour. So please note that we'll share answers to your questions directly to the ones that provided them. And of course, note that we have our Future of Energy event live in Amsterdam at the end of March, like Franny was explaining, and we will have way more time to discuss these topics there. So we will have one session on the battery business cases, and one on battery storage TA programs. So please join us there. And then I hand over to Franny after thanking Aaron and Amir for their great contributions today.
Yes, thank you, Mark, as well, for your excellent guidance over the past hour. And indeed, thank you, Aaron and Amir, for sharing your very interesting insights. And as Mark mentioned, we will continue the conversation on BESS at the Future of Energy, so don't miss it. And make sure to use the lower ticket price that is still open and available at the moment when you are registering for the event. So hope to see you in Amsterdam, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.